So you'll see this tells you we're live. All right, I just need to run around the corner for a second, and then we will start. And while I do that, yeah, if you want to handle that.
Are we sharing or?
We got a ton of them.
Oh, okay. I said it was 15 pages. Or was he just kidding? No, I didn't expect that maybe. I said people like have to pop in and do it. Yeah, that's good. Just like gay visited the student with the student. Yeah, super good for her mother. Yeah, and her staring back at you. No, more pictures. Yeah. Oh, I do. Who knows? After we review the names. How is her mom doing? She's a little bit. She's up in the chair.
Grab this.
I didn't know. I didn't see it today.
There we go. All right, good evening everyone, both near and far. If you're with us online, hopefully you're able to go onto our Facebook page and download this rather large PDF today. I apologize, it's 15 pages, so which is either a good sign because there's lots of wonderful information, or oh my, what are we in for? So I hope, I'm an optimist. Not only do I believe the glass is half full, I believe it's half full of 7-Up. So I'm truly optimistic. I want to address 3 areas tonight, if as time permits, and if not, we can extend it. But we usually have about an hour. One is I want to do a bit of a review of last week to reinforce perhaps some of the confusion. Secondly, I want to address the issue of why doesn't God make it simple? As you know, both Doug and Dylan and perhaps others of you have thought, like, why can't it just be, and that guy's going to do that, and he's going to go there and do that? Why all these pictures and all these graphic images and all this apocalyptic literature? And then, as time permits, I want to look at 2 of the best and most hopeful prophecies in the book of Zechariah. Because the purpose of prophecy is to be comfort and encouragement. And these 2 prophecies are absolutely spot on, and I trust in this day and age that we live in, they will give you encouragement and comfort as well. If we fail to give comfort and encouragement, we are failing the purpose of prophecy. If there's one thing you take away from all of this, if we fail to give comfort and encouragement, we have failed the purpose of prophecy. All right, so the first thing is just a bit of a quick review. You'll see a timeline in front of you on the screen. If you're watching at home, hopefully this is in front of you. And for those of us here, you have it on page and on screen. So this is just a brief outline of the book of Zechariah so you can see the overall picture. 1 to 6 is the call to return. 1:7 to 6:8 are the visions, the Messianic kingdom visions, these 8 visions that we've been looking at. And then 6:9 to 15 is the introduction of the branch. And then we get 4 messages and 2 oracles of burdens. So that's kind of just to give you a framework to work in how it is structured. All right, now, image or clarity. Why can't God just say what he means? So what do you think, before we get into the reasons that I've crafted for us tonight, why does apocalyptic literature possess all these grandiose imagery and chiastic structures that your poor heads last week? But what do you think? What might be some of the reasons, without looking at the screen or in the notes in front of you?
You study it.
Okay, it forces us to dig.
Well, beyond our little, we think in the box, I think. I think it makes us think outside the box.
Yeah, pushes our limits a bit, forces a new way of thinking on us. Good. Anybody else?
If you keep it, even if you keep it simple, people are still going to misinterpret. So simple maybe isn't always the answer.
That's very good. Yeah, because sometimes even simple can get it wrong. And so maybe simplicity is not the answer, right? There's something to be said to the depth of it.
And let's face it, like, everything about God is grand,
Yeah, it speaks. Yeah.
Why wouldn't this be?
A grand God produces grand words and grand images. Yeah. All right. Let me just give you, I've been pondering this the last week. This isn't taken from anybody. This is just me, Dan's ponderings. But I want to give you some reasons why I believe it is the way it is. First off, words don't do events justice. Think about some of the greatest events in your life, whether joyful events or tragic events. How often do words not do them justice? Perhaps in the moment of grief, we think, there are no words for this. Words can't express this. Or even in moments of great joy, words can't express this. And the elements that we're dealing with, the images and the events are so grand that to say it was a sad day is really irrelevant. I read a good article, little article, and the author said never use the word very. So you're not very tired, you're exhausted. You're not very happy, you're elated. You're not very hungry, you're famished. So he said good writing doesn't use the word very. I like that. So, God isn't very big, he is enormous, right? These events aren't very important, they're critical, so we find better words. So the words don't do the events of the end and Satan and his kingdom and powers really justice. Where imagery, often imagery does justice to the moment. You think about, you go to Grand Canyon or Hawaii or wherever, and you think words don't do this justice. The images are so grand. Secondly, pictures position us in the right place. This is a quote I found which feeds into this. The purpose of apocalyptic language is not to picture the words, but to position the church community in right relationship to things, people, events, and institutions that presently constitute. This is probably the most kind of vague, but it's not so much to give us the language of it so that we can, but they put us in a place of humility. It puts us in a place of worship. It positions us in the right place to hear what God is saying. So when we think of a four-headed beast, we don't feel like we're in control of the situation or our understanding can grasp it. So it positions us in a humble place. And a lot of these are repeating, I recognize that. It expresses ideas beyond words. Apocalyptic imagination both preserves and intensifies the sense of expectation, and delay, tension, and eventual resolution, right? It expresses these big ideas that are so often beyond words. And I think I'm repeating myself here, but I'll hit this hammer a few times. Hit this nail a few times. Number 4, it makes time, place, and people irrelevant. Although prophecy is relevant to a specific time and place and people, it is often bigger than that. So you think about the vision of the overcoming of evil, and it's very specific to Zechariah's events and to Jerusalem and to all these, King Cyrus and all this stuff. But it also speaks to us in grander ways. So when we hear of Satan being overthrown in Revelation, that speaks to us today and says, Satan can be overthrown today. So both present and future are both presented in prophecy. Although it speaks to prophetic events to come, it also speaks to the not so prophetic events in our life. And it means that the events applied in some way to all people suffering, all people in need of hope. When we read writings from the Holocaust, they clung to the events of the apocalypse because it meant that evil would be overthrown. Right? So does that make sense? Although that way we read the passage of Scripture and go, you know what? This may not be, but I can connect this with me. Because a red dragon's a red dragon, right? whether it's a specific person, and it is, but it's also, we can kind of personify it. I'm not narcissising the text, but hopefully personify it. Secondly, it gives evil and hope a face. Anybody know who this man is?
Jeffrey Dahmer.
That's Jeffrey Dahmer, right? This is the face of evil. This man did horrible things. And if all I have to say to you is Jeffrey Dahmer, and you fill in all the blanks, the emotional feelings, the imageries, the story. And so if I say the red dragon, he killed and ate a bunch of people.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what he
Yeah.
did.
Bonnie, do you remember any more?
Yeah, like,
that was Picton.
No, that was Picton. This is the guy down in the States. He invited people back to his room.
And then he became a Christian. Like,
Yeah, he wanted to create a zombie, so he would inject their brains with chemicals, and he cut them up and ate them.
cut them up, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
They burned the building down, by the way. After the events came out, they relocated all the residents in the building and they demolished the building. But it gives that, and so when we say, Satan or the God's Rangers, that gives a hope, an image of hope, right? And so apocalyptic literature gives us these images that connect with greater truths. Lastly, images contain emotional tone and color and feeling that words simply can't. You know the old phrase, a picture paints 1,000 words? So when you look at this image, what emotional images or thoughts come as you look at it? Desperation. Starvation. What's that? Looking for food, yeah. Escape. Yeah.
Branded.
He's branded, yeah. But what's he found? He's found food. He's found hope. Yeah. So despite his despair, in this moment he has found hope, right? Yeah. He's found all that he could have possibly imagined. And that image, we could reflect on that image, the use of the contrasting colors of the red bag in contrast with the gray of his prison pajamas, right? The look on his face, is it despair or is it surprise? Is it discovery? Is he, I can't believe what I found, or I'm suffering? We can connect with all these images. And so an image contains emotional tone, but it also contains emotional color, dark and light, shadows and contrasts, and feelings. So when we see the image of 4 horsemen mounted in their glory, heading north, east, south, and west, patrolling the earth, looking for God's hand, we see a very powerful image. Horses contain, for most of us, a very strong emotional image, right? So when these images are presented, they contain, and I'll go back to these words, tone, color, and expression that simply words can't. Does that make sense? And so I think apocalyptic imagery is there because the image contains so much more than if it was simply described. I want to put to you tonight at why apocalyptic literature uses images. Because apocalyptic literature is design language. Is that a familiar phrase? Design language comes out of industry and design, where it says design language or design vocabulary is an overarching scheme or style that guides design elements, of complement of products and architectural settings, creating a coherent design system for styling. All right, in other words, a design language is what a company chooses to identify itself with. We're going to do a little exercise tonight. These are all pictures of BMWs from 1962 to 2013. The top 1,500 was a BMW designed in 1962, and the bottom E90 was designed in 2013. What do you see in common?
the back end of the car.
The back end of the car, that line, right? That straight line with that curve, right? And you notice that BMW, that's called design language. BMW incorporated that design into every vehicle for 50 years. And you always knew, if you looked at the back window, no matter what model it was, you knew it was BMW. So that became part of their design language. That curve had to be included. It isn't something, they've kept it. Let me give you another illustration of design language. All right. This is Lindy Material Handling's product line for this year. What do you see in common? Forklifts, right. What's the design language?
They're all red.
They're all red. So color is part of their design language. Okay? And black.
They all red.
They all live. Take a look at that little black triangle.
Yeah.
Everyone has the exact same black triangle. Very similar, right? So as soon as you see that, you know it's a Lind product. because that little graphic element, or that little shape, and also this line here is consistent throughout. Everyone has that same degree of line, right? So in other words, that design language is built into their products, so you knew exactly whose company it is. Just like BMW had the design. Does that make sense about design language then? Okay, we see that. I was looking for purses, but I don't understand enough about purses to see design language in purses. I suspect there is though, right? And we see that everywhere.
I don't see this, what's the same about this card?
This window, this kind of, the line, in the horizontal line below the windows.
That line that goes like that each time.
Yeah. And also that
And that-
line
yeah.
on the body of the car.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have seen that in the
All right, so we're going to do a little exercise as we expand this because this will lay the foundation of what I want to share. What does the design language, I'm going to show you two pictures, and you have them in your notes, but I thought color helps. I want you to look at this. This is a 1982 Chrysler K car, not in very good shape, though. All right, there's a design language. What does it communicate to you? What does it tell you? Just emotionally.
Junk.
Junk. What's that? Used, okay, but look at the shape.
It's very, almost
Box.
utilitarian.
Utilitarian, boxy,
Yeah, boxy,
practical,
Family.
Chunk.
family. What's that, Doug?
Chunk.
Chunk, yeah, that's a good. It's a chunky car. It's practical. You're not going to pay much for it. Just looking at it, what do you think of the quality?
Cheap.
Cheap. Good. Okay, this is the front end. What does that tell you? You think much money was spent in design? Probably very little, right? This is a design language that communicates to you, the consumer, right? Cheap, ugly, uninventive, unreliable, uninspired, uninteresting. Just anybody with passion does not want this, right? This is a terrible design language. But it's affordable. That's right. So it's telling you it's going to be cost affordable. Economical, which is if what you're looking for. All right, let me switch the design language to a Japanese design. Now, what does that language tell you?
Oh, control.
Fast.
Fast.
Tough to get groceries.
Tough to get groceries, yeah. What's it
Tough to get
communicate?
in and out of.
Tough to get in and out of, yes. Extremely tough to get in and out of. Impractical. But what else?
Fast.
Fast, exciting, desirable, okay,
Expensive.
expensive. Now here's even the better part, the front end. This is called the fish car. Because what does it look like from the front? Which would be very Japanese, right?
I thought he was smiling.
It is, maybe it's just a smiling, but you're subconsciously, you pick up cues, right? Because you understand that image conveys emotion to you, right? There's a certain sense of uniqueness, otherworldliness even, quirkiness. But the practical side of you says impractical, can't carry groceries in it. But it's constantly, do you understand that? You see that design images contain a certain language. Well, once you understand the design language, then you understand the image's meaning, right? So swooping lines speak to speed and power, right? Boxy lines speak to economy of design. And so once you understand the language of design, you understand what it means, and you also understand the designer's intention, what the designs of the designer. So what was the designs of the designer of the K car when they designed it? What was the designer's intention? Cheap.
Affordable for lots of families.
Affordable for lots of families. Economic, right? So you understand, okay, this says something about the designer. So as we look through apocalyptic literature, blah, 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 it's tough to get across the tongue, is a design language. It's how God, through the design, it speaks to the meaning of what it is. So when God uses the image of a red dragon, what does that communicate?
Fire.
Fire. What's that? Danger. Bonnie, you had something?
I did, I said
Fire,
fire.
yeah.
But power,
Power. Yeah.
ugly.
Ugly, not natural, not a part of the created order. Yeah. Evil, threatening. Yeah. Because had it been a brown bunny, and he came in the form of a brown bunny, right? You'd go, there's no weight to that. There's no terror to that. There's no aggression to that. He's like, oh, okay, well, it's just a bunny. That's fertility and whatever, right? But by choosing these images, a four-headed leopard, what does that convey?
Freakish.
Freakish, yeah, unnatural, yeah, threatening, power, yeah, and a leopard, speed and aggression. So we don't have to say Alexander the Great's four kingdoms, because you go, well, I don't know who that is, but if I say he's a four-headed leopard, you go, oh, I know who that is. There's a threat to him. He moves quickly across the land. He's a predator. There's violence contained within this. There's an abnormal nature. All this becomes part of the design language of Apocalypse. So Apocalypse carries with it a language unto itself that conveys so much more emotion. One last illustration. What does that convey about how we think in the West?
Yeah, having more fun in the summer.
They're having more fun in the summer? Okay, good.
Is it talking about our life?
Okay, there's a sense of the four seasons of our life.
That's right, they're young.
Winter is ugly.
Winter's dark, yep, by having dark blue, good. Yeah. Time is linear, notice. We go through these four seasons,
You do,
Right.
you must.
and we think of them as distinct, right? Beginning and ending, beginning and ending, beginning. Spring passes into the next. So we think of beginnings and endings, right? That image conveys how we think about time. That there's a beginning and ending to the seasons of life, and also progression. Boop, leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next, and eventually it ends. That's a very Western way of looking at time, which is something I've emphasized with you. Now I'm showing you a Jewish calendar.
Oh, yeah, circle.
There,
Make it a circle.
there's a Jewish calendar. What does that convey about how they understand time?
Go round and round and round.
It goes round and round and round and round. It doesn't end. Life has no ending. Life just keeps cycling, right? We think of life ending. No, life just keeps cycling.
Yeah.
You may wake up one day in a different location, but life keeps moving. Yeah. It's not futile,
No.
but it's cyclical, right? And if you notice this, it's tied to this calendar. It's all tied to the season, to events, right? So January brings the almond trees bloom. Then we get the citrus fruit harvest. Then we get bread, the first fruit, the big harvest in March. Then we get the autumn, what they call the autumn rains. Then we get barley harvest. Then we get the harvest of the vineyard. Then June and July things are growing. And then we get down into September, which is the grape harvest. Then the olive harvest. And then plowing time, getting the land ready again. And then we get into grain planting time. And then the summer rains. Now don't worry about the calendar because Middle East is different than North America. But what's everything centered on? Agriculture. Life is rooted in the land, and it's the life and the growth of the land. We plant the seeds in springtime with good seed on the ground. But anyhow, hymn that we're going to sing on, a song we're going to listen to on Saturday. But this sense of that. Notice how that changes, the image changes the language of understanding of life and time.
Do you think it's more just because of where it is? Because harvest and planting can go almost year round there, whereas for us it is a set time.
That's right. And the world you live in determines how you think about the world.
Yeah.
You're right, Donna.
Yeah.
We tend to think in seasons because we have such distinct seasons.
Yeah, we're bound by it.
Sure.
See,
Yeah.
Maui doesn't.
Yeah. And that environment has affected how we think about our lives and our time. Where their environment, which is nice, 12-hour daylight all year long. Jesus, if he lived in North America, would not get up before sunrise to pray in June. He'd be up at 3 in the morning, right? It'd be nice in the wintertime, get up at 9.
He wouldn't want to have been born in a manger.
No.
No, it'd be awful cold, yeah. So, you're right. The environment changes how we think about life and time. You're right. So tonight, we come to a series of visions. We'll get to those in a minute. But before we do that, okay, what I wanted you to see from all that is that the reason that apocalyptic literature is images is because we know in Scripture when we start getting to those kind of images, we're switching genres. We're not telling stories anymore. We're not giving history anymore. As soon as we see those grandiose images, we know that we're in a new kind of literature, that we're actually talking about the future. So if I told you the story of, I'll go back to my rabbits, 2 rabbits went up the hill. You go, okay, that's probably a parable about today. Okay, he's actually talking about it today. Jesus does this all the time, right? Let me tell you the parable of the sower and the seed. And they go, okay, this is about life here and now. But as soon as Jesus switches into that apocalyptic language, we know he's moving into the prophetic. So what it does is it gives us a cue of the change in literary forms. So as soon as you go to apocalypse, you go, oh, Ezekiel sees 4 horsemen and this and this. Okay, now we're switching to apocalyptic literature. Therefore, we're talking about prophecy now. But if Ezekiel just tells a story, we're not sure. So apocalyptic literature gives us clues to the nature of the message. Does that make sense? That's partly why. It's also because apocalyptic literature contains ideas that are too grand, too big for mere words. And they can only be expressed. And also sometimes they're seeing things that don't have a common, when John sees, the stingers in their tail and the hornets, maybe he is seeing helicopters. And he doesn't have the language to express it, so he expresses it in, it looked like to me. So that's also why it's these grand images, because he's using the language that he has to describe things he's never seen before. Be like you and I, if we were raised in Saskatchewan and we went to the west coast and saw the ocean for the first time, what language would we have? It's like Lake Pelche, except it goes on forever. Like that. Okay, that's about all you'd have, right? A really big lake. Well, no, it's an ocean. You have no concept of the depths of it.
If you never saw a helicopter before, and all of a sudden one come over the hill,
Absolutely.
how would you describe that?
So John uses these natural images to describe these images of things he's never seen before. So apocalyptic literature carries a certain emotional color and strength that it doesn't have. It speaks of things too great for words, evil and that. It gives us an image that we can connect with on a very emotional level, but also a very personal level. And it also lets us know when we're moving into the future. So does that make sense why God uses apocalyptic literature? Because it's such big subject material. What's up to us is, once you understand the design language, then you know the meaning. Right? So think about color. Blue, black, blue, black, blue, black, black. We are a rainbow of colors tonight. What does black convey? Dark, evil, class, yeah. We know from law enforcement that red cars get ticketed more often. Simply the fact. Why?
They're speeding.
Because they're speeding. Because red means fast. Yeah, somehow. They also jump off the page. Somehow in our brain, if it's red, it's going faster. We jokingly say that red gives you 2 more miles an hour on top, right? Because color conveys meaning. So, Shelley came in here with bright red hair, we go, that's a certain meaning that she's trying to express. So that's why these images are also rich in color, because color conveys meaning. All right. Let's move on. Let's do a bit of a summary. Okay, that was the first thing I wanted to share with you. Second, let's do a quick summary. If you have your notes with you, and now I didn't put page numbers on, but we are past the pictures. This is why I put color up here and didn't print in color, because I'm a Mennonite. All right, I'm just going to switch this back to here. I'm going to bring myself back and get rid of that and bring me back in. You have to say that sound when you do that, by the way. You have to go, it's a requirement. All right. So, now let's do a summary of Zechariah. 8 visions, right? The man among the myrtle trees, the 4 horns and the 4 craftsmen. If you're following along your notes here, everybody's good. The surveyor with the measuring line, the cleansing and the crowning of Joshua the high priest, the golden lampstand, the 2 olive trees. That's where we are up to. And then there's the flying squirrel, the flying scroll, the woman in the basket, and the 4 chariots, which we'll get to. Last week, we looked at how these structures, and I put them here so hopefully you can see that the horsemen among the trees and the 4 chariots are the same vision, right? 4 and 4, okay? So 1 and 8 are the same. Good. This is the answer. This is good. The 4 horns of the 4 craftsmen equal the basket. They're the same or complementary. They might be opposites, but they are there. Then the surveyor, the guy with the plumb bob, and the flying squirrel are there. The surveyor And we'll see that in a minute. The vision of Joshua and the lampstand and the two trees are the same. Remember, AB, and sometimes it's AA, sometimes it's AB. Is this connecting? Okay. And then we have our little structure in the numbers, 1 and 5, 2 and 6, 3 and 7, and 4 and 8. Right? And why is that? Because they all interlace. If they were lines, but because this line, because if you had a pen, you could go 1 and 8, and then 5 and 4. If you connect those lines with a pen, you'll get a crisscross center. Right? And what's at the center? Jesus. Yeah, God. Jesus, right. And now we boil it down to the beautiful simplicity of the gospel. Right. And that's why it's so beautiful, because it's these supporting ideas, and in the hub is Jesus. So what we see are the 8 visions are the gospels. The promise of peace, evil is thrown down and removed. We will see God and his word ever before us. We will be priests, and we will see the temple. And at the center of this whole thing is Jesus and the Spirit. All right, I'm hitting that repeatedly so that it comes out with clarity. What we see in Zechariah is considered the most messianic of all the prophets. No one points to Jesus like Zechariah does. And we'll just see here, and I want to give you evidence as to why that is. We see he is the branch or the sprout. We see his entry of Zion's lowly king, which we see later on confirmed. We see the sale of Jesus by Judas. We're going to look at that, Zechariah 11. We see mourning over the pierced one, which we'll see in chapter 12. The fountain opened for sin in 13. The smitten servant in 13. The glory of Jerusalem at the center of the world. And his second coming where he will be crowned king. These are all ones we're going to look at in the weeks to come. But increasingly, Zechariah gets messianic. He pushes into the Messiah, right? And in Zechariah, it is quoted the most often in the New Testament. So let's do a little digging. Donna, if you want to read Zechariah 1:8, and then Shelley, I'll just get you started in Revelation. We won't read all the verses, but Revelation 6:1 starting. So Donna, we'll start with you there.
I saw at night, and behold, a man was riding on a red horse, and he was standing among the myrtle trees, which were in the ravine, with red, sorrel, and white horses behind him.
Again, the language of color. Shelley, Revelation chapter 6, just starting verse 1. Goes all the way to 8, but I'll probably stop you early.
I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. When the Lamb opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth.
Okay, I'll get you stopped there. 4 horsemen, 4 colors, right? This is Zechariah's vision of the 4 horses, just now in heavenly terms. So Zechariah sees the 4 horsemen roaming about the earth. John sees the revelation of the 4 horses roaming about the earth. Good. Doug, do you want to read Zechariah 3:2, and then Bonnie, Jude 9?
The Lord said to Satan, "The Lord rebuke you, Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is not this man a burning stick snatched from the fire?"
Good. Jude 9, Bonnie.
But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not himself dare to condemn him for slander, but said, "The Lord rebuke you."
So we get this image of Satan being rebuked, and then later on we get the image in the New Testament of Satan being rebuked. So we get these images, parallel structure images. We won't go through all these, but we'll do one more. Joyce, Revelation 3:9, and Zechariah 3:9, and Danny, Revelation 5:6. Just like
See the stone I have set in front of Joshua. There are 7 eyes on that one stone, and I will engrave an inscription on it, says the Lord Almighty, and I will remove the sin of this land in a single day.
And then Danny, Revelation 5:6.
And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth.
So do you see the parallel structure? We could go through this whole list, but Zechariah's images find their parallels in the New Testament. Even the language, rebuking may be the weakest of the one, but we see Satan being rebuked. We see 4 horsemen, we see 7 eyes, and so that's why Zechariah is the New Testament prophet, despite being an Old Testament prophet, or why the New Testament attaches itself or pulls out so much of Zechariah, because he is the messianic prophet. All right. All 14 chapters are about Jesus. That's the beauty of this. So the answer is Jesus. It's wonderful. Chapter 1 is Jesus is the one of the, he's the riding one, he's the measuring one, the cleansing one, the empowering one, the judging one, the crown one, the rebuking one, the restoring one, the kingly one, the blessing one, the shepherding one, the returning one, the smitten one, and the reigning one. Which sounds like I should be having a little more tone in there, but Jesus is present in every chapter in Zechariah. This book, that's why this book is so beautiful. It's about Jesus. Okay. So that's a bit of an overview. All right, now we get back into our wonderful images. These are the easiest visions, thankfully. We're now down to it's clear. Despite all appearances, these images are nice and clear. All right, turn with me to vision number 6, chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. Harlan, how's your reading tonight? Zechariah chapter 5, the first 4 verses. Everybody's there? Take it away, Harlan.
I looked up again and saw a scroll flying through the air. What do you see? He asked. A flying scroll, I replied. It appears to be about 30 feet long and 15 feet wide. This scroll, he told me, represents the words of God's curse going out on the entire land. It says that all who steal and lie have been judged and sent to death.
Yep. Is that all the way to verse 4?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Behold, what does he say? What do you see? Flying. I know, I keep thinking squirrel, but
Why?
because squirrel and scroll are so close, and I'm just a little language challenge.
And here you have it as a roll.
Yes, a rolling scroll.
Yeah.
Oh, I do. I have, behold, a flying roll. Oh, spell check.
But do you know what day it is?
The 16th?
And what day our Christmas banquet is?
Saturday, the 18th. No. Saturday I know today's Wednesday. Saturday the 20th. Saturday the 19th. Thank you. Thank you. I can interpret apocalyptic literature, but I don't know what day it is.
It's called genius.
Yeah, well, it's called something, all right. My meds are working. All right, the flying. Actually, I like the image of a flying roll better. Big bun just going through the sky. What do you see? A flying roll. Is that a Kaiser roll? All right, a flying scroll. Thank you. And he says, what do you see? And what does Zechariah say? I see a scroll flying through the air.
The scroll is a paper wrapped up.
That's right, Harlan. Yep, exactly. If you rolled up, yeah. What happened, because they didn't have book binding like we have, and so it was written on either one of two materials, either hide, either lamb or goat, that was called vellum, or deer skin, soft, right? And then they would tan it, and then they would use ink and they would write on it.
That's their books,
Yeah, and then they would roll it, or else it was written. No, they would take reeds, like reeds you'd find in a river, you know, the cattails, and then they would open them up and flatten it, because you know the reed's hollow, right? And then they would dry it and they would weave it together, and they would write on that. Now the problem with the reed is you can't roll it. That's pages, and it would rot very quickly. But a scroll would be written on hide, vellum, and then rolled. And they were only a certain length. Just mechanically, you can only do it so long. So every book in the Old Testament is a certain length. And each one is written to fit the scroll. And that's when we talk about scrolls unrolling. Which is also why that the last pages are often the ones that are destroyed, because they're on the outside that leads to rot. Right? So the inside ones would be protected. So if this is the Old Testament, Genesis would be preserved the best, where Malachi and Zechariah, Malachi would be the one that would be damaged the most. That's just the mechanics of scrolls. Now here's the really cool stuff. They would actually write with gold as well. And it would be liquefied, and then they would inscribe into gold. There's a scroll that is actually written in purple and gold. Anyhow, it's just the most beautiful piece of art, but it's intensely valuable because of its nature. So he sees a scroll. It's 20 cubits long and 10 cubits broad, or as Harlan read, 30 feet long and 15 feet wide. So this isn't a little scroll. It's a 2-to-1 aspect ratio. So how far is 30 feet? How far is it to that wall, do you think?
It'd be a half the length of this.
Room? Okay. Yeah, and then half the width probably?
Probably.
Yeah. So this is not just a little piece of vellum, right, flying through the air. It's huge. Now, interesting, these dimensions are a picture. Remember design language? So I'll pass on Donna. We'll go back to Shelley. Could you read 1 Kings 6, 2 and 3, and then Doug, Chronicles 4, 1. I'll give you a moment to turn there.
First Kings 6.
2 and 3, please, Shelley.
The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 wide, and 30 high. The portico at the front of the main hall of the temple extended the width of the temple, that is 20 cubits, and projected 10 cubits for the front of the temple.
So the scroll is the same size as Solomon's porch. Doug, Second Chronicles, you got it? You got it there? 4:1. Give you a moment.
Give me a minute.
I appreciate you still use a book.
Second Chronicles
4:1.
He made a bronze altar 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 10 cubits high.
So it's the same dimensions, height and width, as each side of the altar. So long, wide, right? So it's got the same dimensions as the altar and Solomon's temple porch. So this is a sacred object. It's not just a scroll which contains this year's wheat measurement, or, it's not just a list of who owes what. This is a sacred divine thing. It's tied to the temple and it's tied to sacrifice. So this is a thing of God's hand, he's saying. So you see where design language, we get these dimensions, and think, okay, this is a sacred thing, it's the same dimensions, ding, 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 and the audience goes, well, I know a room that big, or wait a minute, that's the same size as the altar. Huh, must be something sacred going on here. So do you see where once you get the language, you get the image and the meaning? Okay, so written on both sides. This also is a very biblical idea. When Moses received the tablets, God wrote the Ten Commandments written on both sides. It's not just two rocks. It's doop, 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 doop. There's doop, doop, doop. Good. All right. Ezekiel's scroll has the same thing. Then I looked, behold, a hand was extended to me, and lo, a scroll was in it. When he spread it out before me, it was written on the front and back. Written on it were lamentations, mourning, and woes. What's the symbolism of using every scrap, of every bit of paper, both front and back? Besides that, you're cheap.
You don't lose it, like it's easier to keep track of.
Okay, yeah, you're not losing it. Good. What else?
Lots to tell.
What's that, Dan?
Lots to tell.
Lots to tell. Good. You're dancing near the edges. Everything's been told. It's complete. There's no space. Everything you needed to say has been said. So this is a scroll of sin. What's that?
Nothing left out.
Nothing left out. Exactly, Harlan. Nothing left out. Sorry, I got excited about that, because that's exactly the answer. Nothing has been left out. So if this is a scroll of sin that's written front and back and really big, what does it contain? All the sins. All the sins of Israel are written on here. None missing. It's full. This is very important. All the sins of Israel. God didn't forget a single sin. And it's complete. So this scroll contains every injustice, every lawless act, every sin of the people of Israel is written on this scroll. Okay. And the scroll is the list of the rebellions of Israel. Now, it's interesting, in Revelation 5:1, John has a 7-sealed scroll. And I saw on the right hand of him who sat on the throne, written inside and on the back, same thing, sealed up with 7 seals. This is completion, right? Complete scroll, the complete record of everything. So the details regarding the scroll point us to the temple, the altar, the law of God, and all the sin of Israel, all contained in that image. Now, had we not explored other passages and looked for the design language, we would have never found the meaning, right? We go, wait a minute, this is tied to this is connected to this. So that's why we study Scripture, we study all of it, so we can go, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. All right, And go back to verse, where are we up to for reading? Joyce, do you want to read verse 3 and 4 again of chapter 5?
And he said to me, this is the curse that is going out over the whole land. For according to what it says on one side, every thief will be banished, and according to what it says on the other, everyone who swears falsely will be banished.
Okay. So what he does now is he sums up all the lawlessness. And how does he sum it up? What two commandments does he use? Everyone who steals and everyone who swears falsely, which is lying. Stealing and lying. He summed up all the sins of Israel in two categories. You're either stealing or you're lying. So if you don't worship God, what are you doing? Yeah, you're stealing from him, right? Because that's due to him. If you say Moloch is, I won't say Moloch is great because he might be hearing. No, if you say that, what are you doing? You're lying. So all idolatry is either stealing or lying. So he starts to sum up all the commandments. It's funny because Jesus sums up the good commandments in love your Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And then he sums up all the bad commandments in stealing and lying. Once you get that, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie. Because coveting your neighbor's wife, well, that's a form of stealing, right? Stealing your donkey, that's stealing. If you don't rest on the Sabbath, that's a form of stealing, because you're stealing the rest that God promised to give you. So you can sum up all lawlessness as a form of stealing, or in relationships, a form of lying. So the angel says this, don't steal, and don't swear falsely by my name, or don't lie. And so the curse is against, basically, summed up in those two things. Deuteronomy 27:26 says, cursed is he who does not confirm the words of this law by doing them. All right. So what's he going to do with this curse? Verse 4. Joyce, you want to read one more time?
The Lord Almighty says, I will send it out, and it will enter the house of the thief, and the house of him who swears falsely by my name. It will remain in his house and destroy it, both its timbers and its stones.
All right. So he's going to take this curse, this lawlessness, and he's going to do what with it? Destroy it. He's going to stick it in these people's houses, which is a weird. So this enters their house. The curse was going to go forth and enter the houses of thieves and those who swore. Who is God cursing? All lawlessness, right? Anybody who's a thief or anybody who's swearing, God is going to curse them. Like a curse moving into someone's house. It's going to spend the night in the house, and what's it going to do? Destroy the house. So what is God going to do with sin and evil? He's destroying it. What sin and evil? All of it. Because it's summed up in these two expressions. God is going to ultimately destroy all lawlessness and all sin.
That's pretty cool, actually.
It
I didn't
is.
really think about that.
Because prophecy is about encouragement and hope. So what is God telling the nation of Israel? First thing I'm going to do with you is I'm going to get rid of all sin in the camp. Anybody who's lawless is going to be gone. Anybody who's a liar is going to be gone. He is going to remove sin from the nation of Israel. He's going to make them holy. He's going to make them a holy people. Does this start to sound familiar now? That God is going to create a holy people. Chosen. A nation of priests who are holy. A nation of those sanctified who are holy. So God is going to purge Israel of its sin and make a holy people. And then we get to this New Testament, and Scripture says, and you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation unto God. Right? The fulfillment coming much later. So the first promise is that it will enter the house. Several of the prophets were shown God's word would consume those who don't obey it. This idea that the word destroys evil. Isaiah 5:24. Therefore, as a tongue of fire consumes stubble and dry grass collapses into the flame, so their root will become like rot and their blossom blown away in the dust, for they have rejected the law of hosts. Jeremiah 5:14. I am making my words in your mouth fire, and the people wood, and it will consume them. Because what does God's word do to us? It consumes and burns out our evil, our lawlessness, our lying nature, our old sin nature. It destroys it. Right? I will take out their old heart and of stone and give them a heart of flesh. So this is the complete removal of evil from Israel and ultimately from God's chosen people. This is a great prophecy.
It is, actually.
Yeah, this is a very encouraging. All right, that's the first one, and we've got a few minutes, and we'll get to the next one. The seventh vision. chapter 5, verses 5 to 11. Donna, you haven't read for a while.
5 to 11.
Yeah, 5 to 11.
Then the angel who was speaking with me went out and said to me, Lift up now your eyes and see what this is going forth. And I said, What is it? And he said, This is the ephah going forth. Again he said, This is their appearance in all the land. And behold, a lead cover was lifted up. And this is a woman sitting inside the ephah. Ephah?
Ephah?
Ephah? Then he said, This is wickedness. And he threw her down into the middle of the ephah and cast the lead weight on its opening. Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and there were 2 women were coming out with the wind in their wings. And they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heavens. And I said to the angel who was speaking with me, Where are they taking the ephah? Then he said to me, To build a temple for her in the land of Shinar. And when it is prepared, she will be set there on her own pedestal.
All right, this is a great vision. He looks up and says, What do you see? He says, I see a basket. A big, big, big basket. Okay, with a lead lid on it. Okay? And he opens up the lid, and this woman tries to climb out. He says, Who's that woman? She says, Oh, she's evil. And he takes her and he throws her back in the basket because she's trying to climb out, right? And he throws her back in the basket. Then 2 women with the wings of storks, which are the only depiction of angels as we think them. We think of women with big stork wings. This is the only time in all of Scripture that they look like that. And they are taking this woman, who is the personification of evil, to the land of Shinar. All right.
Is that a real place?
Yes, it is, and we're going to get to it because that name is critical. All right, let's take a look, because this is a great vision.
Why is it a woman?
Oh, very good, Doug.
Tarsus,
You're going to like this, Doug.
Tarsus, the country of Babylonia.
Ah, good. Yes.
It is.
In the words of Jeff Goldblum, yes.
It's not.
All right, so he gets a big basket. An ephah was a dry measure for things like flour, grain, and barley. It's 10 omers, and 1/10 of an omer, which was the same as a bath. In today's measure, we're looking at 6 or 7 gallons. This is a 5-gallon pail. But it means the biggest pail they had. Because in Jewish culture, the biggest pail they had was 5 gallons. Why?
That's what they could carry.
Biggest you could carry, yeah. And you couldn't make much more without it breaking apart. So just mechanics of it, right? They didn't have, like we have, big troughs. They had 5-gallon pails because everything was schlepped by people. So, but this is a big enough one that there's a woman inside. All right, verses 7 and 8. The ephah has to cover the lid of lead. Why?
Keep the evil in.
To keep the evil in. Lead's heavy, right? This is straightforward.
Can't penetrate it.
Can't penetrate it, right? Light can't penetrate. Her influence can't get out. And he sees there's a woman inside, and he says, Who is this woman? And the angel says this woman is wickedness. In the Old Testament, I've got to try to be very lightly here.
Yeah.
In the Old Testament,
Just as I thought.
wickedness is personified as a woman. Okay, go back to Proverbs. There are 2 women he's supposed to pursue. The one is wisdom, who is the faithful, virtuous wife, and the other one is the harlot, foolishness, the harlot, right? So women are depicted, in this case, as symbolic of wickedness. But we also see women as a symbolic of holiness. So the church is the bride of Christ, the holy, pure bride, right? Babylon in Revelation is described as the harlot, right? So we see this contrasting 2 women. The woman of virtue in Proverbs and the harlot. The woman of the bride in her purity, and then the harlot dressed in red. Yeah. Again, design language. White, pure, red. That's why we don't have red wedding dresses. Because you go, ooh. I don't know. She is wicked. And after saying this, the angel throws her back down inside the ephah and puts the lid back on. Now, commentators are all over the place with who this represents, but we see this woman reappear. Shelley, you can read it from your notes in Revelation 17, 3 and 5.
And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and her adornment was gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations and of unclean things of her immorality. Upon her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth.
All right,
You
so.
can never act this out.
No, this year's Christmas play, The Mother of Harlots.
Could you imagine?
So, what do we see? What's the image here? Evil. We've got a woman in a red dress with a glass, and she's drunk. And she's sitting on top of this weird animal.
Yeah.
And she symbolizes all that is evil. Red being evil, right? She's not pure. She's scarlet. She is drunk on the blood. Later on, we'll see she's drunk on the blood of the saints. But she carries with her hand a goblet, and her name is Babylon. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, this woman is the mother of harlots and abomination. Wickedness is her name, and her name is Babylon. Where are the Jews right now? In Babylon, right? The land of wickedness, the land of adultery, the land of evil. All right. This harlot is the adulteress, the one who is abomination, and she, behold Babylon. Babylon is a scarlet woman. Israel is the pure bride. How could this woman, Babylon, be the mother of every abomination and harlotry? Babylon. What time is it? We've got time. Okay, Noah had 3 boys with him in the ark. His son Ham turned out to be wicked. If you go to Genesis 10:8, somebody want to read that? We're up to Doug, I guess. Genesis 10:8 through 10. If you look it up in the index, you'll find that it's early in the book. Genesis 10, 8 to 10.
Genesis what?
10.
8 to 10?
8 to 10.
Okay.
Excellent.
Don't laugh at me.
Because it's all going to happen to all of us.
Cush was the father of Nimrod, who grew to be a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in Shinar.
Huh. Keep going. Oh, that's 10. Good. We'll stop there. All right. So, Ham, this is the descendants of Noah, and he has a boy named Nimrod. And Nimrod is what? A mighty hunter before the Lord. That's why they called him
Nimrod.
the mighty hunter before the Lord. I just love how clear Scripture is sometimes. We go, why isn't it clear? It is clear.
It's repeated the other way.
All right. Before. What does that mean? It could mean in the presence of. I'm here before you. But if I am standing before you, it can also mean against, in defiance of. I am before you. This most likely is against, in opposition to. He is before the Lord. He is the mighty hunter who is before the Lord. And he is the father of what nation? Babylon. Because as Doug read, and the kingdom was Babel in the land of Shinar. This wicked woman who is evil personified is being taken to Shinar, back to where she came from. Okay? It gets worse. The beginning of Nimrod's kingdom was Babel in Shinar. Now Nimrod, I gotta get this straight so I don't get it wrong, had a son, I think, named Tammuz, who dies and is resurrected and brought back. And there's a whole liturgy of the second son, of the son of the god who is killed and is resurrected and brought back. It's all a false gospel. I don't have it in my notes, and I'm doing from memory, but I think that's the direction it heads. It really isn't until Babel that they turn to harlotry and abominations. Matter of fact, Genesis 11:4, Bonnie.
Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth."
That phrase will reach is in italics. That's been inserted by your English translators. The text simply says, a towers whose top into heaven, or will be unto the heavens. They're not building a big tower to get into heaven, like geographically or topographically or physically. What they're doing is they're building a tower unto the heavens.
To be noticed,
Yes, which is
to be noticed.
to be noticed by the heavens, to worship the heavens. It's a temple.
I thought they wanted to.
Yeah, that's the image that, because this will reach throws us off. We keep thinking, they're building a tower to get into heaven, like Jack and the Beanstalk. But this is a tower unto the heavens. It's a place of worshiping the heavens. They're trying to get to heaven.
Is this the Tower of Babel?
Yes, the Tower of Babel. They're trying to get to the heavens, right? Now we think they're trying to get to the heavens by building, physically. But how do people try and get to the heavens? Through worship. Yeah, false worship, right? The Tower of Babel was built unto the heavens, which is the worship of the planets, the zodiac, idolatry, all of that. This is the beginning of all false worship, because they're trying to find their own way to get to heaven, right? Rather than God's way. So when God called people to get to the heaven, to meet with him, where does he call them to go? Remember from our study on angels and that? They always went to mountains.
Right.
Right? Because the mountain was the place where you met God. So what is this? This is a man-made mountain. It's a ziggurat, probably, right? It's a man-made mountain. Man is saying, I will build my own way to God. I will build the meeting place. God will meet me on my terms, on my mountain that I have built by my hand. And God says, no, you will meet me on my mountain that I have built by my word. And so this is false religion, where the worship of God is meeting God on his mountain on his terms. Human religion is meeting the gods on our mountains on our terms. It's false religion. So they build this ziggurat to reach the gods, to reach the heavens. They build their own mountain of God. That makes sense? You see the image? And that's why the images of Genesis and the images of Moses on the mountain all play and speak to the language of mountains. So they build this tower, this mountain tower, to meet with the gods. And God says, nope, not going to happen. You are not going to do this. And he goes down, dispels their languages, and casts them across the earth. But that place was Babylon. Hence, to babble, to speak in many words. God confuses their language, and they all start babbling to one another. That's Babylon. All right, we're almost done. So he takes this woman who is the personification of evil, who is Babylon the great whore of Babylon. You can use that word, we're grown-ups. And he takes her back to Shinar, the mountain. He takes her back to where she came from. In the vision, Zechariah sees a woman who's being relocated, moved from the place where she is back home again. And if you recall from Genesis 10, Babylon originated in the land of Shinar. If this wicked system personified as this woman began in Shinar and will be relocated in Shinar, she must be somewhere else. Well, we'll get into Revelation, which is the city of Rome. Whole other story, though. The wicked woman in Babylon will, according to the book of Revelation, continue to increase, sitting on many waters, deceiving the people. But during the final 7 years, she will be defeated, stripped of her power, and moved back to the land of Shinar. She will be sent packing back home again. In other words, her influence had extended across the whole earth. By the time we get to the end of Revelation, the whore of Babylon's influence had been extended. And God's saying, nope, her influence is done. She's packing her bags. I'm sending her back home to where she belongs, to Shinar, to Babylon.
So is that like evil today?
Yes.
Still?
Yeah, because she personifies evil. Right? She's the picture of evil. That's why I said apocalyptic literature gives us a face. And in this case, we have a woman dressed in red, drunk. And her influence is growing. As time has gone, the influence of the woman of lawlessness is growing and growing and growing and growing and growing until it extends over all the earth. And Babylon is served by three gods: the beast, the false prophet, and the Antichrist. Jerusalem, which is the pure one, is served by the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Right? On her forehead is a name, says Babylon. On Jesus' forehead is a name, his own name. Right? So we get these contrasting set of images. As we move into Revelation later on, we're going to see all these images live in parallel. And then once you get the parallel, you go, oh, I get the meaning. All right, let me wrap this up. These are the two clearest visions. First, we get the promise of the removal of evil. Evil and lawlessness will be removed from God's people. When you get to 1 Peter 4:17, for it is time for judgment to begin with the household of God. And it begins with us first. What will be the outcome of those who don't obey the gospel of God? Well, we know their house falls down. That's what Zechariah told us. So Zechariah promises the nation of Israel, God is going to make you pure and holy. And what is God's promise for his church? He will make her pure and holy. And then he says, and I have good news. Evil will then be revealed for what she is. The lid will come off. Oh, there's evil. Look, we now know who it is, because before evil didn't have a name or an identity. It was just there's evil. And Zechariah lifts the lid off and goes, oh, evil. That's called Babylon, right? Evil now is recognized for what it is, Babylon, and all that it contains. So now we know who she is, but she's powerless, and she's sent packing back home. So its origin will be made clear. It's from Babylon, the great, from time immemorial. Its nature will be seen. It is drunk on the blood of the saints, and it will be sent back to its place of origin. These two prophecies are about the end of evil. The end of evil within Israel, purified, and the end of evil upon the earth itself. So that is good news. The prophecies of Zechariah for the nation of Israel came to pass. As we live in our day, we see those prophecies. Judgment begins in the household of God. How many times have we seen in the last couple of years pastors being called out for what they are? We're seeing I think we're seeing God start to judge the house. Right? We're seeing churches that were, deceptive being revealed. What's going on? I think God is judging the house of his own house. He is doing exactly what he said. His word, his law is moving into the house of God and purifying it. And then once that is done, then evil itself will be removed, ultimately.
So that,
What's that, Harlan?
Put things in order.
put
Yeah,
it in order.
put his house in order, yeah.
And it's just like that's what heaven is now.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, there is no evil.
There's no evil.
Yeah,
Like, you know that, there's no tears, there's no crying, no pain.
yeah.
There's no evil.
Yeah, which is
Like,
a nice
so that's
thought.
why they can't see us or have anything to do with this.
Yeah, at this point, they don't have locks on their doors.
Because they couldn't.
Yeah. It's interesting, if you read scripture, there's never mention of locks. Locks are a later invention, but so these two visions now are moving into the end of evil. And once we move out of the end of evil, then we get the beginning of good, the coming of the Messiah, which is the means by which all these things. All right, does that help clarify things? Was it clearer tonight than it was last week?
Helped a lot, Dan.
Hopefully it was a little clearer. And again, one thing I did not touch on was the women with storks, the stork-winged women. They're most likely demonic forces, because they are taking her with them back to their home. Right? They're rescuing her. Some people think they're angels doing God's will by removing evil. Some people think there's satanic forces taking their girl with them and moving back. I don't know who they are. But this is the only time in Scripture that these beings are described as women with the wings of storks. I'll leave that whether they're good or evil up to you. I don't think. Zechariah doesn't contain enough information to give them identity. They're just the means by which she's removed.
Before those wings of, you see them everywhere. That's what angels are.
Yeah.
And it's only mentioned at one time.
And if they are demonic forces, then we've got an issue with our art. But I wouldn't push that, because the text isn't clear enough. Because we know some angels have wings, some have 6.
Yes.
All right. I hope this was beneficial to everyone, and I hope that this is getting clear as we go.